Hey family, it's me again. I found something pretty interesting. I just want to read it and as you know, our brothers say, let's get the babies out the bathwater. Now, as you see the title, it says Atlantis in Wisconsin in search of King Solomon mines, right? So let's click on that. Let's just do a little search, see what they talking about, right? This lady name is Mary Stutterland. You're gonna see the website I was at. All right, this just gives a little bit of history about her. It says the governor of Kentucky commissioned her as the Kentucky colonel for her work on the ancient sites of Kentucky. For the last 5 years, she had been exploring, mapping, and documenting the ancient water structures of Rock Lake near Aztalan. For the last 14 years, she has been documenting the ancient site around Burlington, Wisconsin. Truth is her passion, right? So we're going to go down some more because I don't have a lot of time. It says in search. This picture says in search of Atlantis in Wisconsin. This picture was took in 2005. It's a little map right here, but I don't have much time. I'm going to leave the website. That's the website. You see it. You can go to her website, check her out. Okay. These are some maps that's on her website about the United States of America or whatever. Okay. It's another one over here that look like the Bermuda Triangle in some way. But okay, I gotta get going. Okay. This says, according to the Greek Herodotus, the Berbers wore what they call mohawk haircuts. It's just giving a little information about the haircuts. Then we go down. It says Wisconsin and Atlantis, the Rock Lake connection. It says King Solomon mines. It says King Solomon temples. It says the Phoenicians, Tyre and Sidon, the Canaanites, the dominant world shipping and trade. It says 1101 to 97. Okay, the Pelasgians influence in Spain, King David and King Solomon reigned in Israel. Says during this time that King David was at his height of his power, while God did not allow King David to build the Temple of Solomon, he was allowed to make preparations for the construction. The project was financed through the vast war booty in the tribute payments that poured in from vassal nations. The preparations and the constructions of King Solomon's are recorded in 1 Chronicles 22, 1 and 16. It also says, hold on, let me get it like this. It says, David accumulated great stores of arms for nails and clamps. It says the arm may have even been mined here in Wisconsin. It says he also accumulated brass in quantities beyond weighing. It says evidence will show that David mined the copper ores from Michigan and may have even been refined in Wisconsin near Rock Lake. Okay. It says David also amassed much cedar wood through his alliance with the city-state of Tyre and Sidon. Okay, Tyre we know was in South America. You know, that's on this side of the water. It says the harvesting of timber would begin. Accounts of the desolate plains, voids of timbers in North America. It says in the course of his wars, David had collected large amounts of gold and silver from tributary nations. And verses 4 quarts, David was summing up his temple preparations with these words: with great pains I have provided for the house of Haya 100,000 talents of gold and 1,000,000 talents of silver, and bronze and iron beyond weighing. For there is so much of it. Timber and stone too have I provided. The lost 10 tribes of Israel found. Page 24. I'm going to stroll down. It says, King Solomon in the harvesting of North America. It says there is archaeological evidence that the fleece of Solomon and harem of Tyre circumnavigated the globe. It says Hebrew customs discovered by the earliest English settlers in the Americas were found among some of the Indian tribes, including the wearing of, I don't know what that is, Oni and Phoenician coins have been found in inscriptions of ancient Phoenicians and Minoan scripts in Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and the Star of David, which you know that's the Star of Renfair, and that's pagan. You know, that's to trap the house of Israel. That's not no glory to Haya. He says make no images at all. And that's in where he says make no images, that goes back to the law in Exodus 20. Okay. It says there was even found in the ancient ruins of a Pueblo Indian in New Mexico. Okay, it says in the middle of the second millennium BC, blah, blah, and down to the time of Solomon, circa 100 BC, oceanic travel by maritime powers in the Middle East seemed to have been fairly common. Okay, I want to read y'all something about, what else did I see that I want to read? Y'all give me 1 second. Okay, I found it. Okay. It says, since the mining operation at these North American sites was taking place during the reign of David and Solomon, it is more than likely that parts of this Lake Superior, that's one of the Great Lakes up here, copper was used to satisfy David's voracious appetite for raw copper for the temple. The biggest customer for copper and other raw materials in the world of the time were King David and Israel, and later King Solomon. It says these ancient Lake Superior copper mines were worked to exhaustion during the reign of King Solomon, meaning that they were producing during that time that David was stockpiling copper ore beyond calculation for the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. Y'all see how big that is? And y'all see that it says for the construction in the temple of Jerusalem. Y'all can check this paragraph out below it. Like I said, I provided the website. Y'all check that out. But I want to come over here. And it says energy disturbance affecting the human consciousness. Okay. It says strange things happen around the area of Rock Lake. It says people see things that aren't there. Ice fishermen can't start their chainsaws out on the ice, but back on shore they start fine. They return to the ice and again run into the same problem. Scuba divers try to film the underwater pyramids, but can't get their cameras to work. Other divers preparing to dive into the water of the pyramids are overcome with the sense of dread. It is apparent that there is an energy disturbance going on in this area strong enough to cause mechanical failure as well as affecting the human consciousness. It is also apparent that this area represents stress points of higher dimensional and intelligent energy. The higher frequencies of energy will render such things as spark plugs for chainsaws or batteries for electrical cameras. It says as it will actually change the vibrational rate of electromagnetic frequencies, thus making them incompatible with the original device, right? Now, I wanted to show y'all that and share that with y'all. I live in Wisconsin. These pyramids are here. Let me see if I can find a picture, an underwater picture of them. Hey family, check this out, right? Y'all see that? What do it say at the bottom? All right, let me zoom in. It says Wisconsin skull, right? It says alien skull, the pyramids of Rock Lake. They saying this was found here, right? Let me go up. They really don't have any good pictures. This is a picture that they have. That's not it. Hold on. Okay, this is what they have right here. This is what they're showing me. The pictures are really bad, but they're underwater. So these are some underwater pictures. Okay.
I didn't know anything about the mound builders, and my first area was in Miamisburg. And so the Adena culture is the early mound builder culture. The dates vary, but we'll say roughly from 2000 BC to 400 AD, or about 400 BC. I'm sorry. And then of course the Hopo culture was the culture that came after them and ended about 480. But anyway, this is the largest Adena mound. That's a picture from on top, and then that's just a picture of it. And they built the conical mounds. And so, I got to Ohio and I saw these mounds, and then the dates with them are like, wow, this is really cool. I didn't know there were these ancient cultures in North America, right? We're not really taught that. But me and my parents and I just got back from Cahokia. I don't know if any of you have been there, but the largest pyramid there is larger than the Pyramid of Giza, and it is not found in our history books. Their children today are just not talk about it. They don't talk about it. So this is Chillicothe, another area I served in. Again, mounds all over the place. This is by Moundville State Park. And on our preparation day, we would play sports, literally a park right here. And we'd play football next to these mounds, and then I'd go over and I'd look at them like, wow, look at these dates. I mean, this stuff is old. Newark, I ended up there. I mean, I was chosen to serve in the special spot. So Newark was super interesting. I've always been skeptical a little bit of solar alignments. I think if you could go out to the parking lot and to your car and find some solar alignments. So I've always been a little skeptical of it. But there were two researchers, and one was from the UK that was an expert on Stonehenge, and then they went and studied the Newark site looking for solar alignments, and they were also, kind of skeptical. And they were really surprised that they found none. They didn't find any solar alignments. And what they found were at least 8 lunar alignments. And that is really interesting because the Middle Eastern cultures align their structures, Temple of Solomon and so forth, to the moon, lunar alignments. And so that is a clear sort of separation from Mesoamerican cultures to the mound builders, is the Mesoamerican cultures are much more solar oriented. In North America, we get much more alignments to the moon. Newark Holy Stones, some of you may be familiar with these. So right outside of Newark is a little town called Geshockton. There's a museum there, the Johnson Farmhouse. You go there, and we went in there, and this was, one of their main exhibits, and I was just blown away, right? So on there, the middle one there is the Decalogue stone, and that's an older version of Hebrew that has the Ten Commandments. And the top symbol there is a symbol for Moshe or Moses. And there's other interpretations of that as well, but most scholars say it's Moses. And this is the keystone to the left, I guess to your right, which says "Holiness to the Lord" in block Hebrew. So fascinating stuff. Immediately controversial, right? Because what are ancient Hebrews doing in North America? But very interesting. So I came home with a real sort of, wow, there's some cool stuff right in our own country. You don't have to go to Egypt. You don't have to go to Central America. So this is how it's relevant. Did ancient cultures around the world know about the ancient Americas? And if yes, why? What was the real reason? Who were they, when, and where? So the main reason we find ancient cultures coming to the ancient Americas is trade. Commerce is the main reason why. And we could talk about, anybody read Frank Joseph? Anybody familiar with him? He has a great book about ancient colonies in the Americas of different cultures. I really highly recommend that one. So I'll just highlight a few here because again it's relevant to Michigan. Frank Joseph, and he writes a lot about North America and in ancient contact with North America. But just wanted to highlight a few of these cultures. But first, let's talk about copper because everything really evolves around this. This is why ancient civilizations knew about Michigan. So copper is interesting. So native copper or float copper is pure copper. Now most other mines throughout the world have it's an ore essentially, and so it's a mixture. It's not pure copper. So pure copper is much more desirable. It's easy to work with. It's much more valuable. So Michigan copper is 97% copper, and then it has a really unique mix with silver. And so essentially. And then they have a nickname, geologists have a nickname for this, they call them half-breeds, when it has this certain amount of pure copper and then a certain amount of pure silver. And only in Michigan is this found, nowhere else in the world. And so Michigan copper almost has a DNA signature. You can track it anywhere. And then that's really, really, really important. So highly sought after, and what we see, the Michigan mines date from about 5300 BC and abruptly ends about 1200 BC. So it peaks around 2300 BC. So if you know your history, it's really peaking around the Bronze Age. And what are our key elements for bronze? It's copper and tin. And 1.5 billion pounds of this copper was removed from these ancient copper mines. And scholars, archaeologists, even mainstream archaeologists, this isn't even fringe archaeologists, are just baffled by where did this copper go? It is just vanished. Now you do have some of this copper found in, Hopewell burials, some in Maine, some as far as California, but this copper that has been found in archaeological sites makes up about 1% of what was taken out of there. So where did it go, right? That's the big question. So we know, now let's jump in. We're going to talk about a few cultures and we'll try to go just a little bit chronologically here. Let me talk about this first. So a historian in the UK, and the reason I highlighted the UK is because the ancient tin capital of the ancient trade world was Cornwall in England. And so Dr. Palvin Jenkins, a historian from Glastonbury, UK, writes, I met a farmer who owns the land on which a megalithic stone circle is, called Mary Maidens, in the far west Cornwall. While clearing hedges, he discovered an arrowhead which was sent to the British Museum for identification. The answer returned 5,000 years old, the source, Michigan. And again, England would be a key, if not destination stop, if you're making bronze, because of the ancient Cornwall in the tin trade there. So there's a plaque also in London's museum that says from about 2500 BC, and that's when we saw the peak of these mines, the peak activity. The use of copper, formerly limited to parts of southeastern Europe, suddenly swept through the rest of the continent. Now there are some ancient copper mining activity in Cyprus, but it's a different kind of copper. It's more of an alloy, an oxide. It's not this float copper or this pure copper. So it swept through Europe and the rest of the country. And then what's interesting is we can start to track it. So let's first talk about the Minoans. These guys were the culture for the Bronze Age. These guys controlled trade, commerce. If you've read about them, they were based in Crete and in Thera, which is Santorini today. And the culture is fascinating. These guys had clay plumbing. They had running water. I mean, just amazing high civilization that they achieved. And they controlled the trade, and particularly the Bronze Age, the trade there. And so this is called the Newberry Tablet, found in 1896 in a little town in Michigan called Newberry. So, and here there was a bunch of characters on here. Now, in 1896, scholars knew nothing about the Minoans until 1905 by British archaeologists on Crete. And then we learned more about the culture and discovered a lot of their language. A lot of the Minoan language is still a mystery. However, we do know the characters, and this is from that culture. So we have Minoan alphabet here, found in 1896 with, these people could have no idea how to reproduce this. So Dr. Barry Fell, eminent archaeologist, is confirmed that this is Minoan, and I think the translation is still difficult. I'll have to reference his book, but I'm not quite sure what it says. We see other Minoan influence on the Ohio River, the Cavern of Glyphs, it's called. There is some petroglyphs that show Minoan dress, very similar to what's found on Crete. And again, if we line up, the Mississippi River and the Ohio River, you can get about everywhere east of the Mississippi River. So it would be a key trade route. Minoan artifacts have been found, a pot in Louisiana. So this is interesting. So in excavations throughout the world, Michigan ingots, now when we say ingots, we're just talking about little pieces of actual float copper, pure copper. They have been found in Crete. And remember, how do we know that? Because only Michigan copper is that pure alloy, that pure mix. So it has a DNA signature. Just think of it as DNA. So archaeologist Zen Halpern says that other Michigan copper essentially has been found in archaeological sites in Britain, Sardinia, Cyprus, the Nile Delta, Turkey, Bulgaria, and other places. Now this graphic is from the National Geographic, this picture here, illustration. So there was a shipwreck off the coast of Turkey in Cape Galedonia, and this has Michigan copper in it. And this ship was full of trade goods. It had Egyptian jewelry, Hittite goods, and Michigan copper. And again, the Minoans would have owned that trade. Now, were the Minoans actually mining, or were they just picking up the copper? It's still debated. But I personally think is this still on? This is still on. I personally think the Adena culture was actually doing the mining, but that is debated. But we know other cultures were picking up and trading this copper. And so in Ohio, this was only found about 20 years ago. A guy with a metal detector was going over, it was either a high school football field or just behind it, and it went off and he dug down. I'm sure he wasn't supposed to, but he found these pendants, very Minoan-like. This dress, it's a certain dance that they do, and this This double axe symbol was a sacred symbol to the Minoans, and this is a pendant. When you see artifacts like that with a hole, it was usually worn around the neck as a pendant. So this found in Ohio. It was Cleveland area, really close to Kirtland, actually. Okay, so we have the Minoans, and they really, so we have them around 2500 BC. They go through some challenging things. So Thera, which is Santorini, erupts and absolutely destroys half of that civilization. And then it continues to thrive on Crete, even though they suffered major tsunamis and other earthquakes. But around 1200 BC, the Minoans just sort of vanish. They disintegrate. Their society is gone. And so waiting in the wing are the Phoenicians. Now the Phoenicians rise about 1200 BC, and again, very similar to the Minoans, they were tradesmen, but what they were really known for, they were expert sailors. And that was their thing. And some of their culture overlapped with the Minoans, where the Minoans would even use Phoenician sailors, and the Egyptians would use Phoenician sailors. The Phoenicians are Canaanites, so they're Semitic. But they, of course, clashed with the ancient cultures in Israel. They were not a fan of Joshua. They actually had some carvings found where they did not like Joshua. And he moved them over to Sidon, which is in Lebanon, and then the Phoenicians spread out across North Africa, and Carthage is a Phoenician city. It's often referred to as just Carthage, but they're Phoenician people. So they had coinage that they would call map coins, and what they would do is, it was pretty brilliant actually. They were sort of advertising everywhere that they had trade or in commerce in the world. And scholars, at the bottom of the coin, you can see that map there, and this is what some scholars, most scholars have interpreted it to be, America, you have Britain there, you have Europe, Africa, Mediterranean, Asia. So essentially, the Phoenicians traded all over the world. Now, when we talk about ancient cultures sailing the seas, right? I'm sure this crowd especially knows that it's debated, right? You have your diffusionists, which are, yes, obviously ancient cultures traded with each other, talked with each other, and you have your isolationists, which are some of your traditional stuck-in-the-mud archaeologists that say, no, everybody was isolated, and different symbols and goods popping up or just coincidences, or the funniest explanations are, you actually find lots of Roman coins all over the eastern United States. Well, some collector, had a whole bag and just dumped them in the Ohio River, right? I mean, they say really odd stuff like this. And they're a dying breed. It's changing, but anyway, that's the poll. That's the contention. So back to the Phoenicians. So this is in Monaghan Island. Anybody familiar with Ogham? So this is ancient Celtic writing. So most of your ancestors here, I imagine, wrote in this. If you guys have some of the same ancestry as I do, I imagine. So here, in Barry Fell, in his book, he writes about this in America, BC. So this inscription says, cargo ships from Phoenicia. And again, this is an island just off of Maine. And it's written in Ogham. So either the ancient Celts were writing it here because it was Phoenician port and to leave it alone, or the Phoenicians wrote it in Ogham, so the Celts would leave it alone. We're not quite sure. But it was used in Ogham, and it's essentially a sign that says this is a Phoenician port, leave it alone. So we've got a presence there in Maine. Okay, and this is a really interesting quote I stumbled on in my research. So this is by Dr. James Gillian, former vice president of Yankton College in Illinois. And my dad's family is from Illinois, so I like all Illinois stuff. So he says, a professional team of archaeologists and linguists have made a systematic sweep of the upper Midwest in about 1992. Finding conclusive evidence that the Phoenicians had indeed sailed up the Mississippi River on a regular basis. Farmers in Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, and Michigan, while clearing their field, That should be fields. In the 1800s, often found rocks inscribed with odd letters in unknown written languages. Many inscriptions were written in Punic, which of course is Phoenician. So very interesting. I think most scholars acknowledge this, but they just are careful because of the politics in academics, right? Egyptians. These guys were druggies. So I won't talk a lot about the Egyptians, but they're a German scientist, and I'm going to slaughter this pronunciation, but Sloveta Balabovanova, which sounds more Russian than German, but was studying the remains of Lady Hanutatu, a member of, basically an Egyptian princess. And what she finds there are traces of cocaine and nicotine. Again, only native to the Americas. That is not found anywhere else in the world. And so we see it show up in ancient mummies in Egypt. They're pretty sure this was used ceremonially, but you know, who knows? Could be recreational. Corn. Corn is another thing you see all over ancient Egypt. There, in murals, carvings, everything, it's native to the Americas. It is not from Egypt or anywhere in the Middle East. It came from the Americas. And you see that all over Egypt. So the Egyptians definitely traded. A lot of scholars think they used the Phoenicians because they were the sailors. But they definitely had American goods. Yeah, there's actually been marijuana that has showed up in mummies too. So these guys were druggies. Hebrews. So Hebrews are the more interesting one because so the Hebrews were not colonizers, they weren't traders, and that really goes back to their theology of a holy land, a promised land. They really didn't go about the world. So it's really puzzling that we see Hebrews showing up, and we see them show up mostly in North America. Very little, if any, in Meso or South America. So there is 8 evidences. There's more, but these are the ones I like. So we talked about the Newark Decalogue stone. This was in Newark. This had the 10 Commandments. We showed it earlier. The Back Creek stone is really interesting. And again, this isn't necessarily related to Michigan, but I'm just showing ancient cultures knew about this area. So the Back Creek stone was found by the Smithsonian Institute, which traditionally is isolationist in doctrine. They are not diffusionists at all. So Smithsonian archaeologists find this. They put it in their museum, the Smithsonian Museum, and they call it Cherokee. Well, it's not till, I don't know, maybe 80 years later, Dr. Cyrus Gordon says, you have this thing upside down. Turn it right side up. It's Old Hebrew. It says, for Judea. That is the bottom one there. For Judea and block Hebrew. So, oops. The Smithsonian can't deny that one, right? They just ignore it. Las Lunas stone, Decalogue stone, has the 10 Commandments in New Mexico. I've never been there. I would love to see it. I have seen the Tucson artifacts, which are really interesting. And you also see Roman artifacts showing up in the Tucson stuff. And then there's a Hebrew petroglyph in New Mexico as well. So something was going on in the Southwest as well. So we start to see these little pockets of ancient culture showing up. Really, really interesting. The Hanukkah, or the Hanukkah earthworks, let me show you a picture of that real quick. Again, found by the Smithsonian. Squire and Davis wrote about this. It was actually in the first official publication of the Smithsonian Institute. Obviously, you see a menorah there, and then you see an oil lamp. So sacred symbols to the Hebrews. Unfortunately, the Army Corps of Engineers ordered this destroyed. So this is no longer, this is plowed over, this does not exist. And that's a whole discussion as to why that may have happened. That's a whole other lecture. Read about John Wesley Powell and you'll start to see where this all connects. Not a good dude. Okay, what they did, they laid them out on a table, and there were several tables like this. And it's always front and back, so we'd go and turn over the tablets. And you see here, it's it's a mixture of languages, right? They just can't interpret it, and so scholars have a big problem with that. Here's one that has a lot of Egyptian influence, even possibly some African influence. Again, Egyptian clothing. This would be ceremonial because it wasn't that big, but you see the mystic symbol there in the middle. And there is a lot of calendar stones, and some of these were 5 feet long. These are massive. So you see the mystic symbol there all over the place. Lots of lunar alignments, different calendar stones.
Salt Lake City. I was permitted to go in and look at this collection a number of years ago. The collection was housed in a building that the LDS Church owns on the west side of the city. And I invited 2 or 3 of my friends to come along with me. 2 of them photographed this. The other main one was Wayne May from the Ancient American magazine, and then his son and daughter was there. The collection had been collected by 2 men, Soper and Savage, and back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. I might as well tell you up front that the leaders of the LDS Church have considered this collection phony, as well as the Smithsonian Institute and the professors at BYU. However, at the time when the collection first came out, it was the kind, and since that time there has been 30 other private collections surface, of which Soper and Savage had nothing to do with, and the other collections have the identical languages that are written on their tablets and the identical stories. So it's a little difficult to believe that these are in fact phony. The next thing is that we've learned that there are literally tens of thousands of ruins that have been found all over the eastern part of the United States, to include Michigan, where these were found. And it's hard to believe these people didn't have some form of language that they would have probably recorded these tablets and artifacts with. I was told by the curator that the collection was going to be disposed of by the LDS Church as soon as Sister Hunter passed away. That this was the rumor that he had received, and that so immediately after viewing this, I contacted Sister Hunter. Milton R. Hunter, her husband, had passed away, and I talked to her, and she was in her 80s, and she told me that the collection belonged to her and her family. It was in Milton R. Hunter's will, and that she had already turned the collection over to her daughter, Linda Hunter Adams, who was at BYU. And she wanted me to talk to Linda Hunter Adams and gave me her phone number. And before I could call after hanging up, she got a hold of Sister Adams, and she called me on the telephone. And so I went and met with Linda Hunter Adams at BYU, and I actually gave her a copy of these artifacts, and she said that these artifacts belong to her family, and that nobody has the right to dispose of these artifacts but the family. So anyway, let's go into explaining what we're looking at. Right here in this picture, we're just past looking at pipes. These items in the front here are lanterns, where they would put a light that they would put a little bit of oil in and burn it for like a candle. And on each one of these items, you'll see this engraving that looks the same on all of them. And they refer to that today as the mystic symbol. They didn't know what it was. It's on the side of this little lantern right here, and you'll see it all over. And it has to do with 5 spikes. These spikes are, they claim, the spikes that were used to nail Jesus to the cross. And these spikes are used in the formation of, they claim, a sacred name. The Indians claim it's the name of Christ. They have a different name for him than Christ, but they claim it's the name of Christ. And that these people who had evidently created these artifacts were extremely righteous people, and these were found, in their graves with them. And here's an interesting piece right here. You'll see that a little later on in this little film. It's only about 15 minutes long, so we have to move along, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute. That was a clay box. Here's slate tablets here, and you'll see the dust on them. They've been sitting there for between 20 and 30 years, and we really weren't allowed to handle these items, and there was many of them that were still in the boxes that we couldn't get to. And the curator mentioned that there are lots of these tablets that are not here. They're in other parts in the church, places in the church, some even in the temple, and that maybe some in private collections. Here's a tool used to bludgeon people that has the mystic symbol on it. There's my gray head and Wayne May's head, and he's giving us an idea of what he thinks is going on in this tablet, which is actually Moses receiving the Ten Commandments. Whoever phoned this up really had a good knowledge of all of these biblical stories. But it's interesting, these graves predate considerably Columbus, and most likely predate the printing of the first Bible. And so these people they're getting these stories from somewhere else than from the Holy Bible, if they're real. So these tablets are really beautifully done, and they're written on slate, and this slate comes from northern Michigan, in the same state, the area where the burial mounds were. This slate is used for making pool tables and so on. It's still there. Even the clay comes from Michigan. And also, you'll see a lot of brass and copper tools and weapons of war in this collection. And you'll see, this brass and copper all comes out of Michigan also. There's two great big tablets, almost 4 feet long. Excuse me, you'll see those a little bit later. Now these tablets are just perfectly done. I've studied them, and you can't even find where somebody slipped up and made an error in writing these. Whoever did them were very competent engravers. And but the stories that are on here, the stories are of the flood and Noah and his 3 sons. And very, very well done. I really believe, instead of just engravings on slate tablets, that these are books. And I can tell you right now that these will last in the ground a lot longer than any books that we have today. And these are telling a story, I believe, of people in the past. There's a slate box with copper wire holding it together. Now here is a little print. I don't know how far back this goes in time, but this is actual print used to press into soft clay tablets. And you'll see some samples of that. Most of the original clay tablets have all disintegrated now. Actually, this collection was not very well taken care of, and a lot of them are broken and destroyed. Now, whoever phoned up the little print pieces too, and in order to make these tablets. Now, see that little clay box we showed you earlier? When it was soft, they had used the very same print tools to impress into that soft clay. A lot of these little engravings you see here, they say they hung around their neck. Most of them had a hole in them, and they hung them around their neck. There's even some people that have claimed these are seer stones. I don't know if that's true or not. Now here's the big tablet. Here's Wayne May. He actually had some gloves with him, and I have a paper towel I'm using here. Now we're going to zero in on the top panel of this. You got to look at this and think about it. These are wonderful. Study this first panel, if you will. Off to your left, there is a special person. He's dressed in a special a gown of some sort, a robe. It looks like he's a very honorable type of person. And one thing he has is a different type of a thing on top of his head. And if this is true and accurate, this is a picture of the creation, and he's using this thing on top of his head, which resembles today a crown. I almost think if it's for real, that's where crowns actually came from, that kings wear. Now, this special person is pointing out to the right side, and he's doing some mystical thing. And notice he's standing in the clouds. In between him and this mystical thing is the sun. And notice that it's shining up. Also, come clear up to the top and you see the mystic symbol on there, denoting a righteous type of happening. And then in between him and the mystic symbol is another personage that has wings, like an angel. Okay, let's go to the next one now. Notice things have changed in this one. First of all, notice where the sun is. It's up above, shining down. And look out to the right of the sun is the moon. This denotes, I believe, day and night. So now the one up above, this mystical thing above, must be creating things spiritually, and now he's creating things materially. Now he's standing on the cloud like before. He's pointing out to the right, and you see a circle. Within the circle you see it looks like a lake. You see animals, you see trees, you see life going on, and you see rain coming down from the sky up above the circle. So here he's creating everything materially. So these people knew all about this even before the Bible was printed. Let's go to the next one. Now look at this next one. The sun is shining down. He's still reaching out, creating something. But the thing he's creating is a man laying down on the ground. So I really believe that this is the creation then of Adam. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, now notice in this one, the special being is then off to the left. Adam is now standing and walking, and the beautiful world is out there in front of him off to the right. And the special being is sending him out into this beautiful new world with all the plants and trees, and it's even palm trees, so it must be tropical. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now this is really an exciting one. The special being is now down. You just see the top half of his body. He's down in the sort of the middle of the picture. And even off to the far right, it looks like there's one of those special beings with the wings. Angels, I would suspect. And notice where Adam is laying. He's laying kind of in the middle of the picture, and the special being is reaching over towards Adam. And Adam's rib cage happens to be open, exposing his ribs. The special being's left arm then is outstretched towards another being laying there, and it appears to be a woman because it has breasts. So that looks like they're using a rib from Adam to create the female Eve. Now notice here that Eve is up and walking around with Adam, and the special being off to the left is telling them about a tree. Evidently this is the tree, the only thing that they were not supposed to take of, and the special being is telling them all about it. Now in this one it appears that the being that has breasts, Eve, I would assume, is now picking fruit from this tree and handing it over to Adam. And it's interesting because in between Adam and Eve is a snake. Now in this next one, evidently the special person off to the left is very upset, and he's asking the other two people to leave the area, which is probably going from paradise down into the evil world or whatever. Anyway, let's go to the next one. Now on this next one, you see Adam. He's sitting evidently on a rock, and he's got a staff in his hand, which I think probably is very important. I'm not sure. And here's Eve off to the left, and she has two children. There's two children. So there's Cain and Abel. And then the next one, Cain evidently is killing Abel, and so there is the wickedness being brought into the world. Now, I'd like to say something here. I think that we're all adult enough to be able to look at things like this and make up our own minds as to whether there's any validity to these things or not. You know, based on whatever knowledge we have, and also maybe using the Holy Spirit to help us. I don't think others should be taking and determining what we should be able to look at or not be able to look at. Now, these things have been hid from the world, especially the membership, for between 20 and 30 years. And then finally now they have decided that Sister Hunter now has passed away, and just last year they disposed of these. You'll probably never see these ever in your lifetime unless you look at this tape. They don't want you to see these. Somebody doesn't want you to see them. This is an interesting one here. It shows a circular, I don't know what it is, but there are lots of circular calendars in this collection. And it's interesting that these circular calendars have 13 lunar cycles. A 13 lunar cycle calendar is a Jewish round calendar. It was the same type that was used back when Lehi was in Jerusalem. And they would have had that knowledge when they came to the promised land. Now, it's interesting today that the Aztec calendar from down in Mexico has 13 lunar cycles, and it also is round. I think there's probably a tie between these. Okay, now here's more of the artifacts. I want to say one thing more about those that tall tablet. It's just one of two tall tablets, and we only got to see one side of the one. It has printing or information on both sides, and so does the remaining tablet. So there's a lot of information we've lost. This tablet we just passed shows Moses again receiving the Ten Commandments. This tablet here is just absolutely beautifully done. It has beveled edges and everything else. It's just beautiful. And the writing in it, there's several different languages. The lower writing you're looking at, they say is Adamic. Now, how did Adamic writings get on those tablets? Did those guys know those writings? I have translations from one man that claims it's Adamic, and I have another monk out of Burma that is a reader of all the tablets and a memorizer of all the tablets. He claims he can read it, and I hope to be able to have him translate it to determine if it's Adamic. Now, this is me and my big stomach, and this is the brass plates. I don't know if it's the brass plates, but these are brass plates. And the writings on them are also Adamic. And we go through all of these and show you all of those. I'm sorry we didn't have more time to do a better job of taking these pictures. But I think these are tremendously valuable artifacts, and if we could read them, we had a real seer who could read these for us, I think we would learn a lot, because if they're true, they predate the printing of the Bible, like I say, the printing of the Book of Mormon. Some of these with Adamic on it either had to be written by the Jaredites because they retained their original language, or they were written by the people during Adam's time. That really throws a wrench in the mix. What are they doing over here in America?